Discover the inspiring transformation of 7 brave women who overcame incredible punishments. Jessica Hayes woke before dawn, the sharp chill of the early morning cutting through her thin walls. The soft light of daybreak barely illuminated the cramped kitchen, and as the coffee pot gurgled to life, she felt the weight of exhaustion descend upon her. The diner where she scrubbed down tables for minimum wage boomed with the patronage of the town's early risers, but it felt like a cage where her worth was measured by the insult of a backhanded comment or a dismissive glance. She could still hear Lou from last week, his laughter ringing, "You're lucky to have this job, Jess." Her heart clenched at the thought. She needed this job, needed it to put food on the table for her 2 young children. The ache of an empty stomach wasn't as debilitating as the slow, suffocating burden of being seen as less than human in her own hometown. Still, Jessica forced her mind to scan the faces of the sleeping children in the next room. Their innocent, trusting eyes were her lifeline. She would do anything to give them a better life, but the cruel reality lingered like dust in the air she breathed. Before she even made her way to the diner, she wondered if this was all her life would offer. What if her daughter, Lily, grew up and faced the same oppressive glance she did? What if she too felt the pressure to quietly accept the restrictions society imposed on women? The nagging thought twisted in her gut. She dreamed of standing proud, telling her children that their mother wouldn't just take the back seat, not anymore. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the coffee brewed, Jessica's mind raced, a flurry of thoughts. The day ahead loomed like an insurmountable mountain. She felt the pressure rise in her chest. How could she find a way to provide for her family that didn't involve feeling like a ghost among the living? A thought clawed at her conscience. What if this moment was the turning point, a spark that could ignite change? But the fear gripped her, too. How could she fight against an invisible wall without losing everything? With the clock ticking down to her shift, Jessica took one last glance at the photo of her children on the fridge. Their smiles served as a reminder of her purpose, yet as she trembled with uncertainty, she questioned what it meant to genuinely succeed. What risks would she have to take? As she prepared to step into a world that required her to go unnoticed, doubts flared in her mind, making her question her worth. With every comment from customers, did they strip away tiny pieces of her spirit? Could she shake the shackles of her reality before it suffocated her completely? Her heart raced as the city seemed to rise around her, unaware of the battle raging in her mind. At that moment, standing at the precipice of her old, heavy life, Jessica felt an urgency coursing through her, but fear clawed at her spirit. Would she have the courage to transform her life? Would she? Jessica arrived at the diner just as the sun peeked over the horizon, casting a dull glow on the battered linoleum floors. The smell of grease hung in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. She tucked her hair behind her ear, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. Inside, the clatter of plates and the distant murmur of customers buzzed like a swarm of bees, invasive yet oddly familiar. But as she scrubbed the tables, she felt that mask slipping, revealing the turmoil beneath. The voices around her faded as she immersed herself in the repetitive motions of cleaning. But with each swipe of the cloth, she couldn't shake the sense of impending change, a trepidation mixed with a flicker of hope. What if today was different? What if she could harness the power of her frustration to fuel a newfound purpose? At noon, when the diner emptied out, Jessica took a rare moment to breathe. A glance at the clock reminded her of the time spent standing still in the same spot, confined. If only she could seize those fleeting minutes to forge a new path, even in small steps. She began to entertain the idea of returning to school, finishing her degree, something she had once deemed unattainable. The thought ignited a flicker of enthusiasm. She possessed the drive but needed to translate that into action. During the rush of the lunch crowd, a customer named Mia, a woman dressed in a sharp business suit, caught Jessica's eye. Unbeknownst to her, Mia had built a career in human resources, helping others navigate their professional futures. A conversation sparked between them over a spilled drink. Jessica, tapping into her courage, shared snippets of her hopes and struggles. To her surprise, Mia leaned forward, genuinely engaged. "You have the passion, Jess. Have you ever thought about pursuing something more?" Mia's words hung in the air, buoying Jessica's spirits like a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. As if a window had been opened, she felt the stirrings of ambition fight against the years of doubt she had harbored. That evening, the weight of Mia's encouragement lingered long after the diner closed. Jessica retrieved her laptop from a worn box in the closet, dusting it off like an artifact from a forgotten time. She felt like an explorer venturing into uncharted territory. With trembling fingers, she logged into the community college website, surrounded by the memorabilia of her children's vibrant art stuck to the fridge. Each scribble became an icon of hope, a reminder of the future she yearned to build not just for them, but for herself. The web page opened, presenting an array of courses. As she scanned the list, her pulse quickened while excitement mingled with anxiety. The human resources classes caught her eye, a direct link to what Mia had talked about earlier. Could she actually explore a field where she might help others transform their lives as well? The idea felt terrifying yet intoxicating, but doubt crept in. Could she balance the demands of schooling with raising 2 young children? Was she sacrificing too much to pursue something that could ultimately lead to frequent disappointments? Each question warped her resolve as familiar insecurities surfaced, threatening to pull her back down. In that crucial moment of uncertainty, she caught sight of her children's drawings again, and the urge to break free from this cycle of mediocrity set her on fire. This was the moment that could pivot the entire trajectory of her life. This was what she had dreamed of. With a deep breath, Jessica enrolled in her first class, heart thumping as she hit the submit button. The decision ignited a warmth within her chest, her act of defiance against years of limitations. But just as quickly as determination surged, doubts began to circle like vultures. Was this a step toward liberation? Or was it a fool's errand that could end in disappointment? The balance between risk and reward felt immense, and she couldn't shake the nagging thought of external judgment. As she closed her laptop, the whirlwind of emotions left her dizzy with the prospect of the unknown. Little did she realize, this singular act of enrollment would set a chain of events into motion that would lead her to confront the very forces that held her down. Would the courage she summoned today be enough to fend off the challenges that lay ahead? The dawn of a new day arrived with a sharpness in the air, and Jessica felt its bite against her skin as she weaved through the morning rush at the diner. The clatter of silverware and the smell of sizzling bacon barely registered. Her mind was elsewhere. Enrolling in classes hadn't just been a click of a button. It had unleashed an internal dialogue that hummed with both excitement and trepidation. As she poured coffee for a customer, Jessica's thoughts flitted between her responsibilities at home and the new academic pursuit that loomed ahead. Juggling motherhood, work, and school seemed like an insurmountable challenge. What if her efforts were for naught? Her hands trembled slightly as she navigated the cafe during peak hours, and she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine. Hollow eyes stared back, challenging her to confront the fear that shadowed her ambitions. She couldn't ignore the sense that stepping into the classroom might mean stepping into a reality she hadn't quite prepared for, one that would require her to face herself more than it would ask her to tackle the coursework. The day dragged on under a heavy weight of anxiety. Each customer's smile tugged at the corners of her lips, but the joy of service felt overshadowed by the knot in her chest. Could she really balance everything? Would her children understand her need for more than this life? As the sun dipped low in the sky, the diner quieted down. An unlikely moment of respite settled in as Jessica cleaned off the last table of the day. Mia's encouragement echoed in her ears. The raw, unfiltered conviction in her voice had planted a seed, and now it was time for that seed to burst forth. Homework, and the demands of schooling waited like an uphill climb before her. Embracing this challenge was how she could evolve, not just for herself but also for her children. After her shift, she limped home exhausted but resolute. The living room was a comfort, filled with the warm glow of evening light and the laughter of her children. Their innocence was a reminder of why she had to fight against her fears. Taking a deep breath, she opened her laptop again, the words "Welcome to Community College" peering back at her like an invitation. With a renewed sense of purpose, she navigated to the course syllabus for her first class. Each topic presented seemed not only a subject but a doorway to a different existence, one painted with aspirations rather than resigned acceptance. The following morning, after a restless night of anticipation, Jessica prepared for her first class. Her heart raced with equal measures of apprehension and excitement. Standing before her mirror, she brushed a hand through her hair, seeking a semblance of confidence. Today marked more than just the start of a class, it was a declaration. Arriving at campus brought a rush of nostalgia and fear, a whirlwind of fresh faces and new experiences that mirrored her inner turmoil. Standing nervously at the curb, she felt adrift, questioning her presence among fellow students much younger and seemingly more self-assured. What if she failed? The question throbbed in her mind until a realization struck her: fear could be a powerful motivator. She had the chance to turn failure into growth. Encouraging herself, she stepped onto campus, purposeful stride silencing the voice that whispered doubt. As she entered the classroom, the scent of dry erase markers and the rustle of paper wrapped around her like a cloak of potential. This is where she would plot her escape from the confines of complacency. Her heart raced not out of fear, but from the thrill of possibility, yet, uncertainty lingered at the edges of her resolve. The room filled with students and murmured conversations made her feel small, but entrenched in her own thoughts, Jessica felt an inkling of belonging starting to rise. But then, just as she began to settle into the moment, the instructor walked in. The confident demeanor and authoritative stance seemed welcoming but also intimidating. She quietly wondered if this person could help her navigate the minefields of both academia and self-discovery. Would she find the courage to raise her voice in class, to challenge not only herself but also the expectations that weighed her down? As the instructor began the session and the first question was posed to the room, Jessica realized she stood on the precipice of significant change. The moment of truth was upon her. Would she speak up and take the first step in redefining her path, or would she remain silent, constrained by the fears of her past? Jessica sat at her desk, her breath caught in her throat as the instructor scanned the room, waiting for someone to break the silence. It felt as though the weight of expectation bore down on her alone. Each second stretched, coiling around her like a noose. She grappled with the conflicting impulses to either blend into the shadows or step forward into the luminescence of participation. The question hung provocatively in the air: what is one challenge you have faced that shaped your life? A light flickered in her mind, a memory of countless sleepless nights where fear collided with desperation as she fought to maintain her family while quietly stifling her dreams. In that moment, Jessica realized that this was not simply an academic exercise, it was an opportunity to reclaim her narrative. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, a knot of hesitation gripped her heart, dragging her intentions down with it. What if her story wasn't impressive enough? What if her vulnerability was met with indifference or worse, judgment? With a tenuous resolve, she shifted in her seat, drawing on the well of strength that Mia had surfaced within her. I've faced the challenge of rediscovering myself amidst responsibilities, she croaked, her voice trembling but audibly present. Working full-time and being a mother, I lost the essence of who I am. The murmur of recognition rippled through the room, intermingling with the subtle nods from her peers. A flutter of exhilaration and relief coursed through Jessica. Unbeknownst to her, she had just planted the seed of connection, and it sprouted with diverse stories shared from her classmates. Each response offered them the space to share their fears, their dreams, and the obstacles they had faced in pursuit of them. As the class progressed, Jessica's confidence began to blossom. Discussions flowed, ideas bounced around the room, and she found herself drawn into the dialogue. In sharing, she not only uncovered fragments of herself long buried under obligations, but she also began to reshape her interactions with others. Each exchange became an opportunity to learn not only from the curriculum but also from those who shared similar struggles. With the instructor calling for collaboration on projects, Jessica felt her pulse quicken. Group work meant displaying her ideas and working shoulder to shoulder with others. It meant being vulnerable. She hesitated, recalling her tendency to buckle under pressure in collaborative settings. Was she the type of person who could advocate for her contributions? Could she assert herself without fear of admonishment? As they divided into groups, she forced herself to approach a cluster of students. "Hey, can I join in?" she asked, her voice firm despite the internal dialogue thread of doubt. They smiled, welcoming her with an ease that settled her nerves. It was in this small act of courage that Jessica made a conscious choice to confront the silent barriers she had built around herself. She shared ideas freely and listened attentively as her group members voiced theirs. It was exhilarating to think that her thoughts mattered, they formed a critical component of the larger conversation. But as the class wrapped up, a shadow of uncertainty loomed overhead. The exhilaration of the day faded to be replaced by the gnawing question: could she sustain this newfound sense of purpose, or would the darker echoes of self-doubt eventually ensnare her again? Would the commitments at home stifle the progress she had begun to forge within the fragile tapestry of her transformation? Jessica clutched her books tightly against her chest as she exited the classroom, feeling both empowered and anxious. The steps she had taken today felt monumental, but the road ahead was peppered with uncertainty and the daunting task of continuity. As she rounded the corner, she sensed a shift in her own landscape. In that moment, she made a quiet pact with herself: she would embrace whatever came next, no longer allowing fear to dictate her fate. But before she could fully savor the resolve, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Mia flashed across the screen, and a chill of foreboding traveled through her veins as she read the words, "We need to talk. I've discovered something that could change everything." What lay ahead would demand more courage than she had ever known. Jessica's heart raced as she stepped out of the classroom, the message from Mia echoing in her mind. The world outside seemed brighter, the chatter of students accompanied by the scuffle of bags felt alive with possibilities. Yet, the weight of Mia's words grounded her back to the reality that had been her life. She found a quiet corner of the campus courtyard, finding solace among vibrant flowers pushing through cracks in the pavement. She took a deep breath, attempting to stabilize the rapid rhythm of her heartbeat. What could Mia have discovered? Curiosity tinged with dread mingled inside her. Pulling out her phone, she replayed their last conversation, recalling Mia's insistence on not sidelining her ambitions, her unwavering belief in Jessica's capabilities. But the emotion behind Mia's words felt different now, anchoring the anxiety in the pit of Jessica's stomach. She was standing on the precipice of a shift, and she needed to be ready. In the silence of the courtyard, Jessica closed her eyes and navigated through memories of the past few weeks, those exhilarating evenings spent poring over books amid her children's laughter, the frustrating moments trying to balance work deadlines and parenting. Yet those moments had also sparked flickers of her identity, fragments illuminating the essence of who she could become. It was this duality that she had to reconcile. Her responsibilities as a mother and her unyielding quest for self-rediscovery had begun to take shape within her. Opening her eyes, Jessica's resolve solidified. The personal growth she was cultivating was new territory, and the prospect of sharing it with Mia both thrilled and terrified her. She needed to prepare for the discussion that awaited. Questions loomed over her like dark clouds. What if Mia revealed something that forced Jessica to confront her fears head-on? She reached for her notebook and began to jot down her thoughts. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, each stroke of the pen fell heavier but felt increasingly necessary, outlining her aspirations, the daunting fears she still harbored, and the goals she wanted to achieve. Each word was not merely ink on paper, it was a lifeline, her anchor amidst uncertainty. The task forced her to confront her internal dialogue. She still felt unworthy, apprehensive of what the future held. But highlighting her dreams felt like planting seeds for new growth. She envisioned what her future could encompass, igniting flickers of ambition. She wanted not just to manage her life but to thrive within it, chasing aspirations she had once cast aside. As she finished her notes, her phone buzzed again. The message was from Mia, urging her to meet. The abbreviated words "urgent" and "can't wait" resonated with a stark finality that set her on edge. Jessica could feel the hair on the back of her neck prickle with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Whatever Mia had discovered could either bolster her journey or threaten to derail it. with newfound determination, she pushed herself off the bench, straightening her back as if summoning the energies she had just documented. The path ahead was still brimming with obstacles, but she had begun to cultivate allies like Mia who reinforced her beliefs in herself. It was time to take that next step and face the unknown. Taking one last deep breath, she headed toward the meeting spot, her heart pounding not in fear, but in exhilaration. Just as she approached the cafe where the conversation awaited, another thought lodged itself in her mind, igniting a nervous energy within her. What if Mia's revelation changed everything she thought she knew about herself? That uncertainty lingered like a distant thunder, threatening to come alive at any moment. Jessica's journey of self-discovery had begun, but the real test was about to unfold. As Jessica stepped through the cafe's entrance, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped her like a warm embrace. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on Mia seated at a corner table, fingers fidgeting with a sugar packet. The urgency of the message had heightened Jessica's senses, a cocktail of hope and anxiety swirling within her. Approaching the table, Jessica noticed the intensity in Mia's gaze. It was a look that conveyed gravity, as if she held knowledge that could alter their lives. Jessica's pulse quickened again. Was this the moment that would unlock her potential or shackle her to her fears? "Thanks for coming," Mia started, her voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of urgency. "I've been doing some digging about the program we talked about." Jessica's heart dropped for a moment. The program. The very thing that could either illuminate paths of opportunity or magnify her insecurities. Her throat tightened, and she struggled to maintain a neutral expression. This could be the answer she'd been seeking or a dangerous confrontation with her own limitations. "Mia," she began, her mind racing. But Mia cut her off, the determination in her eyes compelling Jessica to listen. "I think you should apply. There's a mentorship opening, and I believe you could be a strong contender," Mia urged, excitement breaking through her somber demeanor. "You have skills, experience, and a perspective that they need." An internal battle erupted within Jessica. She wanted to embrace this confidence, to see herself as Mia did. Yet the shadows of self-doubt clawed at the corners of her mind. But what if I'm not enough? What if they see me as just a mother, just a worker who can't excel? The rawness of her vulnerability laid bare on the table between them. Mia leaned forward, her expression softening. "What you are is more than that. Your journey makes you unique. They want authenticity, someone who has faced adversity and emerged with wisdom. You can provide that insight." Jessica absorbed Mia's words. They resonated like an affirmation, but doubt still clung stubbornly to her thoughts. Nonetheless, she could feel an ember of ambition igniting within her, a flicker of the person she wanted to be. "But what if I fail? What if I get rejected?" She pressed, her voice dropping to a whisper. The fear of failure was suffocating, and she wrestled with the weight of those possibilities. "Failure is part of growth, Jess," Mia replied firmly. "Not attempting is the real defeat. Imagine looking back years from now, wishing you had taken the chance. You are a mother, yes, but you are also an individual with dreams, ambitions that deserve to be pursued." As Mia spoke, Jessica envisioned herself stepping onto that stage, holding a microphone, her voice resonating with confidence. The vision felt exhilarating yet terrifying. But beneath the fear lay the thrill of potential, a whisper of the future that could be crafted through her choices. "Okay, I'll consider it," Jessica conceded, the words feeling heavy yet liberating as they left her lips. A part of her longed to dive into that uncertainty, and kindly, she embraced the mix of dread and excitement. The journey would not be easy, but the idea of stagnation was heavier than any risk of failure. Mia's smile broke through, radiating encouragement. "We'll work on the application together. This is just the beginning, Jessica." Though Jessica agreed, she was left still wrestling with doubt. Just as she began to articulate additional thoughts, another message notification interrupted her train of thought, this one bearing a familiar name, a name that had haunted her decision-making process for years. What if she started contemplating the implications of the incoming message? What if this is more than just an application? What if it means facing parts of my past I've been avoiding? The tension hung like a storm cloud, coiling tightly around her resolve, ultimately teasing the revelation that awaited her. Jessica's whispered fear set in. The true test of her transformation was already unfolding before her eyes, and she could no longer ignore the shadows that loomed behind her. As Jessica sat across from Mia, the cheerful noise of the cafe faded into an echo, leaving room only for the thumping of her heart and the rapid-fire dialogue in her head. She stared at her phone, the familiar name pulsing on the screen like a beacon. The thoughts cycled through her mind: what did they want now? And how did their presence intertwine with the decision she faced? It all felt impossibly intertwined, a snarl of past regrets and future aspirations. Mia noticed Jessica's distraction and nudged the phone gently. "Are you going to look?" she asked, her voice encouraging yet probing. Jessica hesitated but felt an intense pull toward the message that lay beneath her touch, as if it contained the key to unlocking parts of herself she'd kept buried for too long. "It's from Kyle," she finally admitted, the name leaving a sour taste in her mouth. Once, it had been a symbol of comfort, of safety, but now it was a reminder of the weight of expectations and judgments. The idea of facing him, of having that conversation, filled her with dread. "Do you want me to read it with you?" Mia offered, her tone both gentle and commanding, a reminder that Jessica wasn't alone. The fear of failure loomed like a shadow, but she opened the message anyway. Jessica's fingers trembled as she read the words, "Can we talk? I need to explain." The invitation clawed at her insides. Her instinct urged a retreat. How could she possibly grapple with the past while thunderously trying to step into her future? "What do you think?" Mia asked, eyes focused on Jessica's face. "How do you feel about talking to him?" Jessica's mind raced. She needed to confront Kyle, needing to hash out the tangled emotions that rendered her paralyzed. He was a significant part of her narrative, after all, a ghost interwoven with her history of self-doubt. But as she contemplated, a swell of determination broke through the thick fog of uncertainty. This wasn't just about Kyle, it was about taking control of her life, claiming her story. "I think I have to," she stated, the words falling out with a surprising firmness. Each syllable shimmering with newfound strength. "I need to confront that part of my past if I'm going to move forward." Mia smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride. "That's the spirit, Jess. Acknowledgement is the first step toward transformation." Jessica's heart swelled, Mia's validation fueled a growing flame within her. Not only did she need to confront Kyle, but also the fears and doubts he represented. This was her way of reclaiming ownership of her narrative, the very thing that Mia had encouraged her to embrace. As the conversation shifted back to the mentorship program, Jessica immersed herself in the practicalities of the application. She outlined her experiences, allowing her journey a multifaceted tapestry of struggles and triumphs to pour out on paper. Each anecdote she wrote was laden with lessons learned, scars that had become badges of resilience. But doubt flickered at the edges, along with memories of inadequacy. Would they even want someone as flawed as her? A mother with a chaotic past? Each question was a barricade, yet her resolve grew denser. She had more to offer than those fears. Finally, as she finished the rough draft, Jessica looked up from the paper, determination gleaming in her eye. "I'm ready to face any and all of this, Kyle, the mentorship, everything." Mia beamed at her, though Jessica sensed something etched within her friend's expression, a deeper understanding of the struggle that lay ahead. Just as Jessica resolved to send her application to the program and reply to Kyle, another notification pinged on her phone. It was Kyle again, but this time, the words were laden with urgency. "I can't wait any longer, we need to meet in person." A heavy weight settled in the pit of her stomach, and she could feel the strings of her past tugging at her once more. The time had come to face the shadows, reveal her truth, and step into the chaos of change. Would she rise or succumb? Only time would tell. Jessica stared at the screen, the words from Kyle almost pulsating with a life of their own. "We need to meet in person." She cursed the way her heart raced, pulling between fear and the thrill of impending confrontation. What was it about him that could still stir such chaos within her? Are you okay? Mia's voice brought Jessica back to the cafe, its ambience contrasting sharply with the storm brewing inside her. Jessica forced a nod, but the tension was palpable. Mia continued to study her, a knowing look replacing the earlier cheerfulness. "I'm just thinking," Jessica confessed, feeling the bile of apprehension rise. Every instinct urged her toward flight, yet beneath that fear was the undeniable need to engage. "I agreed to confront him, but now that it's right in front of me, I'm not sure I'm ready." Mia leaned closer, a supportive presence. "You are ready, Jess. This is about more than Kyle. It's about taking charge of your narrative, owning it fully." With a deep breath, Jessica tried to focus on Mia's words. The realization ignited something dormant within her. This meeting could shatter the walls she'd built, it could free her from the weight of guilt and resentment that had been shackling her. "I can't let the past dictate my future anymore," Jessica said, determination coloring her voice. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over Kyle's message. "But how do I ensure it doesn't pull me under?" Mia reached out and gently placed a hand on Jessica's arm. "What if you went in with a plan? Set boundaries and establish how you want the conversation to unfold. You know what you need to say." Jessica liked the sound of that, but doubt lingered. Could she assert her needs and not crumble under the weight of nostalgia? She considered the beckoning shadows of her past moments of shared laughter, those painful silences when words unsaid burned hot between them. But as she thought of Kyle, a flicker of anger surged through her. No more looking back with regret, she whispered to herself, more than Mia. "It's time to take control." Mia's enthusiasm shone through. "Exactly. You could remind him how his actions shaped your journey and what you've accomplished since. Use this as a chance to reclaim your power." Jessica nodded, envisioning their conversation more as a negotiation than a confrontation, each point a declaration of her self-worth. She would not present herself as the victim, she would assert the transformation she had undergone. And yet, as she envisioned this, a terrifying thought pierced her resolve. What if Kyle's explanations were compelling? What if they threatened her newfound stance? She pushed the thought away. This was about accountability. Kyle had a chance to explain, but she wasn't obligated to forgive. The balance of power shifted in that moment. "Then let us make a framework for what I want to express," Jessica suggested, a sense of urgency replacing her earlier trepidation. "If I can outline the topics I want to cover, maybe it will anchor me." Mia beamed, grasping her notebook from the table. They spent the next hour drafting a list, her achievements, the emotional wounds that needed acknowledgement, and her aspirations moving forward. Everything contributed to the woman she had become. As Jessica articulated her thoughts clearly for the first time, she felt a surge of confidence washing over her. Each item on the list represented her growth, the steps she had taken toward healing. It was a revelation. She realized how much she'd overlooked in the midst of her inner turmoil. But as Mia urged her to expand on the positive elements of their discussion, something within Jessica flickered a hesitance. Wasn't she allowed to be angry? What would it mean for her journey to omit that vital piece? Distracted by her swirling thoughts, Jessica noticed the time, panic replacing clarity. It was time to reply to Kyle. She typed, then paused. Set boundaries, prep for everything, prepare for his attempts to sway her but also make space for her hurt. With shaking hands, she pressed send on the message that would set events in motion. This was more than a meeting, it was a declaration of her existence. And as she glanced at Mia, who was now frantically checking her own phone, Jessica couldn't help but feel the weight of change encroaching on the horizon. What would happen when she stepped into that room with Kyle? Would she emerge a conqueror or feel drowned by the tides of their past? "Jess, it's happening," Mia said, excitement bubbling in her voice. Jessica held her breath. The moment of truth has come. The door to their past began to creak open. What revelations awaited when she would cross that threshold? Jessica paced her small apartment, the walls closing in as she rehearsed the conversation in her mind. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating scattered papers on her desk, yet her focus remained locked inward. Mia's previous support glimmered in the back of her mind, but doubts clawed at her composure. Her phone buzzed against the countertop, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Kyle confirming their meeting time, a reminder that the moment she had been dreading and anticipating was scheduled for tomorrow. A whirlwind of past memories danced vividly, moments of laughter, intertwined with jarring reminders of betrayal. No. Enough. Jessica straightened, casting aside the ghosts of nostalgia. This time, she would reclaim her narrative. She allowed herself to feel a flicker of anger, flicking it like a switch that ignited her resolve. Anger could serve a purpose. It was the fuel of transformation. Jessica moved back to her desk, reviewing the notes she'd made with Mia. On top of listing her achievements, she added another section. What did she want from this meeting? Would it be closure? Or perhaps an acknowledgement of the hurt caused? She scribbled fiercely, desperate to embody the power she was beginning to recognize within herself. As she looked over her newfound clarity, a wave of vulnerability swept through her. What if Kyle was the same person he had always been? What if she entered that room prepared, only to feel lost again? Her chest tightened at the prospect of being unmoored amid their shared history. Decisively, she pushed the haunting uncertainties aside. This meeting wasn't solely about him, it was about her standing firmly in her truth, bridging her past with the woman she had become. It was essential for her healing process and a stepping stone toward reclaiming her agency. She focused on the effects of his absence, how the years had woven resilience into her being, how she had built a life that thrived on her terms. The quiet moments of reflection only underscored her need to face him as an equal, no longer subjugated by guilt or fear. Jessica took a deep breath, imagining the meeting. She saw herself walking into the cafe, the familiarity of the ambience contrasting starkly with the harmony she was creating within. If she could envision all the contours of the dialogue, the probing questions she would ask, the statements she'd assert, she might fortify her position further. Mia's words echoed, "Use this as a chance to reclaim your power." Power was not simply granted, it was an evolving part of herself that she chose to manifest. The night deepened outside her window, and Jessica found herself anchored by a sense of purpose. She was determined to express not only her grievances but also what she had achieved in spite of the turmoil Kyle had introduced into her life. As she wrote down her emotions, she saw the depth of her journey unfold on the pages, moments of pain intertwined with growth. This was her liberation. Placing the list to the side, she poured herself a glass of water, contemplating her next steps. The significance of honest confrontation was dawning on her, and she felt a palpable shift, a readiness to utterly face the past without being consumed by it. In that moment of clarity, she realized she wasn't just preparing for a confrontation, she was ready to recognize the implications of forgiving herself, regardless of whether Kyle sought reconciliation or simply justification. But just as she began to feel a settled confidence, another thought crept into her mind. Was she prepared for the possibility that Kyle would try to manipulate the conversation? A cold shiver of apprehension coursed through her. Just then, another notification on her phone made her jump. It was Mia, sending an encouraging message, but it felt like a distraction from her inner storm. Taking a deep breath, Jessica reminded herself of the true significance of tomorrow. This was her crossroads, no more evasions, no more hiding. She would go into that cafe not to seek validation but to stand tall. As the night wore on, and exhaustion began to tug at her body, she felt a surge of adrenaline. The meeting loomed closer, and though clarity filled her thoughts, the complexity of her feelings remained a tight ball in her chest. Tomorrow would reveal not only the reality of her connected past but the pathway she could forge into her future. With one last glance at her notes, she whispered to herself, "I will be heard." And with that, she knew, it wasn't the meeting that was terrifying, it was the undeniable truth that her journey had only just begun. What awaited her at that cafe could mirror a new dawn or set off a chain reaction she couldn't predict. Either way, she was ready. The moment had arrived, but would it lead her toward understanding, or would it drive her deeper into conflict? Jessica stood outside the cafe, the sun peeking through the clouds, casting a warm glow that felt more like an invitation than a mere coincidence. Today was pivotal. Today marked her confrontation with the man who had once held her back, but now stood as a representation of her past. After weeks of introspection, self-discovery, and innumerable preparations, Jessica was ready. As she pushed open the door, the familiar bell chimed above her. The vibrant energy of the cafe felt calming yet charged with electric anticipation. Spotting Kyle at a corner table, Jessica's heart raced but also thrummed with resolve. She approached, each step fortifying her mental armor. "Hey," she greeted, her voice steady, revealing nothing of the tumult within her. Kyle looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes, but she sensed hesitance clouding his expression. "Thanks for coming," he said, the weight of the situation hanging heavy between them. With a deliberate exhale, Jessica took her seat. "I needed to talk about everything." Kyle nodded, his face unreadable. This was where the conversation would pivot, not just about blame but of mutual understanding. "I know I've hurt you, and wait," Jessica interrupted, her tone firm yet calm. "Before we get into apologies, I want to lay out my truth. I spent years stuck in the shadows of what you thought I could be. But I've finally taken steps toward owning my life." Each word poured from her mouth like an unshackling. Kyle looked momentarily stunned, perhaps shocked by her assertiveness. Jessica continued, "I enrolled in community college, I'm pursuing a path in human resources, aiming to help others just like someone once helped me." The astonishment melted into an earnest expression, and for the first time, Jessica felt the tide of control shift in her favor. "I'm here today not just to confront you but to reclaim my narrative. I did the work to understand how your actions impacted my identity, and I won't let anyone diminish who I've become." Kyle opened his mouth, but Jessica pressed on, refusing to let him divert her. "I believe in confronting our past. I need you to acknowledge the reality of what happened between us and how it affected me. This isn't about blaming you, it's about recognizing the truth so that I can move forward without the weight of resentment." For a moment, silence anchored the cafe, their eyes intertwined, and slowly, she saw understanding flicker in Kyle's gaze, alongside a hint of regret. "I didn't realize that's right," she interjected, "you didn't realize what your words and actions did to me. But that's why I have to be here today and say it out loud." The validation felt like a bomb, releasing pent-up tension from her shoulders. Kyle nodded slowly but intentionally, "I've been reflecting too. I understand now how I forced you to feel lesser, and I'm sorry. But you are right, it shouldn't take my apologies for you to recognize your strength." Somehow, hearing him say that filled Jessica with a mix of vindication and release. This wasn't about forgiving him immediately, it was about her journey toward acknowledging the growth she had achieved. "And I need you to know that I'm not the same person you left behind," she emphasized, finality in her voice. "I'm building a new life, and it's one where I define my purpose, not you." Kyle seemed to absorb the words deeply, perhaps even acknowledging the moment as a turning point for himself too. "I want you to know I'll always support your journey, even if we're not a part of each other's lives anymore." With each exchanged word, Jessica felt the last fragments of doubt dissipate like morning mist, revealing the solid ground of her personal power. She had faced him with courage, confronting not just him but every shadow of doubt that had held her captive for so long. As she rose to leave, Jessica felt something new within her, like the weight had lifted enough for wings to emerge. "Thank you for listening," she said, clarity buoying her spirits. Walking out of the cafe, the sun burst from behind the clouds, enveloping Jessica in warmth. She had transformed her vulnerability into strength, her doubt into undeniable conviction. No longer would she allow anyone, not even her past, to dictate her worth. It was time to embrace the life she had built, filled with ambition, integrity, and authenticity, and most importantly, she walked away knowing she had conquered a pivotal moment in her self-journey, having proved to herself and would-be doubters that she was not just a survivor, she was a queen in her empire. What followed was an openness to whatever came next, possession of her future firmly in her grasp. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about Jessica's incredible journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this remarkable conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Show your support for these inspiring narratives.